The year was 1985. Back then, you could walk into nearly any corner shop in Macau and get a hot meal for spare change. But there was one place tucked down a narrow street near the harbour that had a kind of legend around it. The Eight Immortals Restaurant. People swore it had the best barbecue pork buns in the city, steamed to perfection, sweet glaze on the outside, juicy, melt-in-your-mouth filling. It wasn't flashy, but it was always packed. Families, workers, cab drivers, and everyone lined up at lunchtime. I went there often, not just for the food, but because it felt real, warm, familiar. You'd walk in and smell soy, garlic, ginger, and that unmistakable roasted sweetness from the buns. The owner, a quiet man with deep-set eyes, rarely spoke. He only nodded from behind the counter, hands always moving. But then something changed. It was a rainy Monday when it happened. I stopped by the restaurant like I always did, grabbed a takeaway box and headed home. I sat at my kitchen table, opened the warm, familiar packaging, and bit into one of the pork buns. And then I stopped chewing. The texture was off, rubbery and dense. I spat it out into a napkin, thinking maybe it was just a tough piece of meat. But when I looked closer, my stomach turned. It was a fingernail, still attached to a sliver of skin. I gagged instantly, my hands started shaking. But after a few minutes, I convinced myself it was probably a mistake. Or a piece of pig's foot, maybe. Or some kind of butchering error. It was disgusting, sure, but not what it looked like. I threw the rest of the food away. Didn't call the restaurant, didn't tell anyone. What would I even say? I stayed away for a few weeks, but eventually the craving came back. That soft dough, the warm glaze, the familiar taste. It was weirdly comforting, addictive even. So I went again. Same place, same quiet owner. He gave me the usual nod from behind the counter, expressionless. That time, the food seemed normal. The time after that, not so much. The filling was rich, but something felt wrong. It had a strange, chewy texture. A little too tough, a little too real. I tore the bun open to check, and what I found made my entire body go cold. Inside was a human finger, cleanly severed, with a slightly chipped nail, but unmistakably real. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I called the police. They arrived quickly, took the bun, the box, and my full statement. None of them said much, but I noticed the officers looked pale and disturbed. One of them, almost in a whisper, asked me to confirm the name of the restaurant. When I said Eight Immortals, his entire face changed. By the next morning, the place was shut down. What followed was something out of a nightmare. The investigation uncovered that the owner, Chan Man Lok, wasn't just running a kitchen, he was getting rid of a body. The rumours were true. He had murdered a gambler over a debt, dismembered the body, and cooked the remains into the food he served. And people ate it. I ate it. I'd gone there nearly a dozen times before finding the finger. And now, I'll never know how many parts of that man I unknowingly swallowed. I spent the next few days in a kind of fog. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that finger, pale, cold, wedged inside a pork bun like it had always belonged there. At first, the police kept everything quiet. They said they needed time to confirm the facts. But the truth doesn't stay hidden for long. Word spreads fast. By the end of the week, news vans were parked outside the restaurant. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, and the headlines were worse than I imagined. Human flesh found in takeout. Restaurant owner linked to grisly murder. Eight Immortals horror. Victim served to customers. My phone started ringing constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Lawyers wanted statements. Even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years were reaching out, asking if I was okay and what I knew. But I didn't have answers. I only had questions. The same ones looping around my head over and over. How many times had I eaten there? How many other people took a bite and never realized? And how many pieces of that man are still sitting in someone's freezer right now, forgotten? Eventually, the police confirmed what many had feared. The victim was a local gambler named Leung. He'd owed the restaurant owner Chang Man-lok a large sum of money. Instead of collecting, Chan murdered him, dismembered the body, and used it. They found bones scattered throughout the kitchen, teeth clogging the drains, and blood dried deep into the floorboards, so old it had stained the wood black. One of the officers speaking to me off the record confirmed what I'd already feared. The buns I had eaten were almost certainly part of the disposal. I didn't want to believe it, but the details were undeniable. The timeline, the evidence, the texture I couldn't forget. Then he explained how it worked. It was the perfect cover. Take the meat, glaze it heavily to mask the flavor, grind it down until it is unrecognizable, mix it with spices and fillers, wrap it in soft dough, steam it until warm and inviting. Then serve it to unsuspecting customers, smiling politely as they take a bite. Customers like me. From there, everything spiraled. First of all was the arrest, then the headlines, and finally the public outrage. And then came the trial. It dragged on for months. I was called in to testify. I remember walking into that courtroom with my hands shaking, trying not to throw up as they swore me in. I had to explain everything. What I found, what I tasted, how many times I'd eaten there, and what first made me think something was wrong. The defense tried to twist it. They said it could have been a mistake. Maybe the meat was contaminated from a supplier. Maybe someone played a sick prank. Maybe I was just confused or exaggerating what I thought I saw. But I know deep down I wasn't exaggerating. I know what I bit into. I remember the texture, the shape, the way my body reacted. And I know what I saw inside that bun was something unimaginable. And Chan Man-lok, who was responsible for all of this, never said a word during the trial. He just sat there day after day, staring straight ahead with the same empty look I remember from behind the restaurant counter. He didn't flinch, he didn't blink. It was like none of it meant anything to him, like none of us meant anything to him. In the end, they gave him life in prison. The judge said he showed no remorse. He said the things uncovered in that kitchen would stay with the crime scene investigators forever. But here's the part no one talks about after all this. I'm still the one haunted. It's been decades since all that happened, and I still haven't touched a pork bun, and also can't even stand the smell of one. Some nights I wake up in a panic, gagging, tasting that sweetness all over again. Sweet, savory, and wrong. I don't eat out anymore. I don't trust kitchens I can't see. Every time I order food, I tear it open before I take a bite. I look for bones, skin, anything, just anything. I can't help it. I check everything now. Every bite feels like it might be hiding something. Because once you've tasted something human, even if it's by accident, you don't come back from that. Not really, because it settles into you like a sickness you can't shake away. And every time you eat something that feels just a little too soft, you can't help but remember. In the end, the restaurant was shut down. They locked up the man who ran it. But here's the truth. That doesn't make what happened disappear. People ate there. People smiled, they paid, and even walked out with warm boxes in their hands, never knowing what was inside those buns. Never knowing they'd swallowed pieces of another human being. I was one of them. Sometimes I still wonder, what if I hadn't looked inside that bun? What if I had just kept eating, never thinking twice about what felt off? Or what else did I swallow without realizing? And how many others did the same and never found out? Because even now, that question never leaves me. How much of him is still out there frozen, reheated, chewed and swallowed, piece by piece? If you liked this video and it made your stomach turn, hit the like button. Subscribe to Insidious Inc. for more stories that serve the truth raw, unsettling, and unforgettable. And remember that sometimes what you chew also chews back.